Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is episode 359 of CryptoBiography, and it's part 6 of The Free Censor. And here we go. And Thom set to work. This involved a lot of reading of the original forbidden texts, which he enjoyed immensely. However, for part of his first day, he started work on looking at documents that had been censored in the past. They'd been created to show him examples of how ideas had been successfully snuck past the regular censors. Presumably, these had been caught by the free censor of the past, or had been somehow found out later on. He presumed that the real work would start soon enough. He looked through the computer. There were lots of notes about many of the old works. One of the things he could sort by, or see for any particular work, was how many times it had been referenced in a censored work. This, he realized, would be immensely helpful in determining an order in which to read and learn the works. Some of the first ones were anti-authoritarian, anti-censorship works. 1984 was actually the first. Apparently, references to Big Brother were the main reason, but there was a list and it included many others. He would have to learn that one first. Brave New World was number 2. He started reading the Orwell novel, but broke it up with some examples of references to it, hoping to get the hang of it. After a long day, he finally got back into the strange vehicle driven by Benjamin 5 and went home. It quickly became a routine. Though he was engaged by the work, he also found that focusing for more than the usual 8 hours quickly tired him, so he stuck to a regular schedule, which he also rationalized would keep Benjamin 5 from having to wait around for him. He tore through books, finding most of them highly engaging. He read from all genres and all time periods. He had some difficulty with the language of the older works, but there was an excellent reference section included in the Forbidden Library, and so he made his way through even the most difficult works, though he couldn't make heads or tails of James Joyce's Ulysses. Still, most of the works he got a handle on pretty quickly. He decided to go with a pattern. 3 new books, then revisit one of his previously read books. That way he could keep familiar with the more often referenced works, but keep expanding his repertoire at the same time. All this was in between working on censoring new writings, which were now very real, and determining, to the best of his knowledge, if there was any forbidden references in them. Most of the time, there weren't. He wasn't being given anything that hadn't been gone over by the normal censors, so the usual incorrect philosophy or dangerous ideas had already been purged. These were writings that the censors or someone up high suspected that secret references to dangerous ideas were being made. So most of the time, these hunches were incorrect. Thom could soon tell when something was being referenced, and was getting better at it by the day. But it wasn't something he could be sure of, not for a long time, even prioritizing as carefully as he was. He resolved, therefore, to put through certain writings as okay, but kept copies with the plan of looking at them with new eyes in the future. Out of the dozens and scores of writings he was given to examine, only 2 had definitely had references he had to give the alert on. The first was a pretty ham-handed reference to Big Brother. Thom wondered if that one was a test, just to see if he was doing the work, because that idea was so well known, even if it was disallowed, that the regular censors should have caught it. Another one was a reference to a work he only read in his 2nd month, Huckleberry Finn. He couldn't claim to understand all the references to local culture, but certainly when a supposed news item slipped in the idea of rafting down a river, he caught it, as well as the more subtle reference to the Hatfields and McCoys, though the names were not used. Someone was trying to put across the idea that the modern state was somehow self-destructive. He marked both references and made notations in the computer, plus a mental note to revisit Twain a bit more often. He had only read Finn and Tom Sawyer, but there seemed to be a lot more. Over the months, then years, he became a true expert at pre-society literature. When he gave himself a moment of time here or there to think about it, he became a little sad because he couldn't talk about this expertise, show it off, or share it in any way. When he allowed himself sometimes socializing on the weekends, he had to skirt around the topic of what he did, and so the thing that took up the majority of his waking hours became a secret to everyone in his life, a group of people who were naturally fading away as his work engulfed him, and his refusal to talk about himself put people off. Still, his work fascinated him for years on end. He saw the months slip by like days, despite his relative youth. He had long since gotten his maximum ranking, and so he didn't even see Benjamin 5 any longer. He drove himself, though always with one eye on his rearview mirror to make sure he was not being followed. Only after he was 30 and did he finally start to feel the loneliness creeping up beside him. He found himself talking to people in restaurants, even just asking to pass the salt, so that he could have a bit of connection. Finally, it happened. He met Lisa in a park one Saturday evening. He had taken a good long walk to feel the wind on his face and was resting on a bench. Lisa, whom he did not know, sat down on the other end of the bench. She was retying her shoelace. He struck up a conversation, which ended with him asking her out for dinner the next night. They started dating, but it was always awkward for him not being able to talk about the many interesting things he saw and did. Sometimes he would hint at what he did, but of course it was all so hush-hush. Lisa, fortunately, did not press the issue. She seemed to be interested in him solely as a person, which he appreciated. As their romance bloomed, he found himself wanting to share some tiny portion of the knowledge that he had. To share, he felt, some part of himself. Of course, he knew that he only had this knowledge so that he could help prevent the information from being anywhere else. He was also aware that his work had resulted in the arrests and convictions, and in many cases executions, of nearly 300 people since the start of his career. But as the weeks ground on, and he felt closer and closer to Lisa, he kept thinking of what work he might bring to her, just enough to let her know roughly what he did and show her some beautiful, if forbidden, work that might make her smile. He knew he couldn't bring an entire work out of the library, so he settled on memorizing a love sonnet by Shakespeare, one which had appeared most among his sonnets in the computer. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? He finally was sure he had all 14 lines memorized, and that night, in bed, he recited it to her. 4 hours later, they broke into his house and took him away. As he was being escorted out the door in cuffs, someone was saying to Lisa, "We told you it was a matter of time. Every free censor breaks. That is why we never stop watching them. Eventually, they will want to break something free." If she said anything back to the man, he didn't hear it. He was dead within the hour. No trial was needed, as he was not publicly known. There was a new free censor in 3 days, starting on the work. That one only lasted 4 months. The one after lasted 1.5 years. No one remembered Thom, or what his eventual rank was. If anyone noted anything about him, it was that he had outlasted all the other free censors before or since. And that was his only epitaph, a note by the watchers about the record time spent in the role of free censor without trying to break anything free. And that's the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry it ended so sad. But, these sorts of stories often do. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, CryptoBiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Mastodon or X. And thanks for listening. Words or music, copyright 2024, Brandon Starr, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.